the irony is both profound and bitter. Ontarians desperately want a federal election right now. They're not going to get it. Meanwhile, Ontarians do not want a provincial election, and yes, they're going to get one right in the middle of a brutal winter, no less. Riddle me this, just how blinded by political ambition is the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario? Ostensibly, the reason for this unwanted election is to give Ford a mandate to deal with Donald Trump's tariffs. But wait a minute, Ford already has a supermajority. The opposition leaders, Bonnie Crombie of the Liberals and Merritt Stiles of the NDP, have said they will support the government in a trade war with the U.S. Oh, and the next election isn't until June 2026. That's like a year and a half away. In politics, that's an eternity. So why are Ontarians really going to the polls now if Ford already has a mandate? You know, I was going to address that query directly to Doug Ford himself, but that would make for a fool's errand, folks, because if you think Ford is running the province, here's a newsflash for you. Everything coming out of Ford's mouth is via the backroom boys. Ford is tantamount to a puppet. I think he wakes up every morning pinching himself to make sure he's not dreaming, that he's actually the Premier of Ontario. In that regard, Doug reminds me of that kid from the Polar Express.
I have to wake up. Yeah, I have to wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
The point is, Doug gets led around by the nose by his handlers like he's some sort of castrated circus donkey, and he's perfectly fine with that. It sure beats being a city councillor. Alas, the people really running Ontario, well, they are anonymous, and they like it that way. Indeed, it's all a grandiose illusion that Doug Ford is calling the shots.
The great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
So let's cut to the chase, shall we? Which is to say, here are my top 10 reasons, and there are many more, but here are my top 10 reasons why I will not be voting for the Doug Ford Progressive Conservatives. And if you are a like-minded conservative, maybe you will be in agreement with me that on February 27th, it might be a good idea to cast your vote elsewhere, or for that matter, go to the polling station and decline your ballot. Number one, remember one of the original promises of the Doug Ford PCs in 2018, that they were going to rein in the radicalized sex ed curriculum of the McGuinty-Wynne years? And wow, was there much to rein in. After all, the author of the sex ed curriculum under Premier Wynne, well, that was her good friend, Benjamin Levin. Levin would later be convicted of several child pornography charges, including the making of child porn. By the way, I tried to ask Wynne about this gross indecency the other night at a Catholic school board meeting. Shockers, Kathleen Wynne is no longer Chatty Cathy.
Miss Wynne, you are personal friends with Benjamin Levin, who got convicted of child pornography. What do you have to say about that? Miss Wynne, can you answer that question? Someone with your Ministry of Education was convicted of child pornography.
Sustain us every day.
David, do you have anything to say about that?
Helps us to find
I have nothing to say to you.
Why?
Christian hope does not deceive or disappoint because it is grounded in the certainty that nothing and no one may ever separate us from God's love.
Still, Kathleen Wynne has been out of office for almost 7 years now, and yet what has happened in that time frame? Well, so many school boards have become even more radicalized to the point that books found in the libraries of elementary schools actually meet the benchmark for pornography. And it gets worse. The three-ring circus that is shop teacher Kerry Lemieux, well, he continues to make Ontario a laughingstock the world over. Lemieux, who dresses as a grotesque caricature of a female, was completely tolerated by the former do-nothing Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce. This despite the fact that Lecce held the power to actually dissolve school boards if he chose to do so. So why didn't he lay down the law? Does he buy into the agenda of the radicalized members of the LGBTTTIQQAAPP community? Or maybe Lecce himself is a member of the radicalized LGBTTTIQQAAPP community. I don't know, but I do know this. He's a coward who literally runs away from concerned parents. And speaking of concerned parents, I thought Doug Ford was one. Well, he's a parent, all right, but he is completely unconcerned, it would seem, that so many school boards in Ontario are toxic cesspools that embrace Marxist ideology. And like I said, Ford promised in 2018 to rein in this crap. What happened, Dougie? Number 2, Ford is buddy-buddy with blackface. How many pressers has Doug Ford attended with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Typically, press conferences in which these two leaders announce they are spending billions of tax dollars, typically on EV battery plants. I would say they are spending like drunken sailors, except I don't want to insult inebriated members of the Royal Canadian Navy. By the way, when have you ever seen Ford in the same room as Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre? Wouldn't you think that an allegedly conservative provincial leader would be simpatico with his federal counterpart? But no. And the reason for that, according to my sources, is that Ford's people simply don't get along with Poilievre's people. If that is indeed the case, this is downright jarring. I mean, I'd call Doug sellout Ford, but I almost forgot Jagmeet Singh has already taken ownership of that nickname. But the point is, maybe Doug and his handlers have more in common with liberals and conservatives. Talk about bait and switch. Number 3, Ford is woke. Lots of evidence here, folks, but in addition to the appalling sex ed curriculum, I'll offer just 2 other examples. First was Ford placing the Sir John A. Macdonald statue at Queen's Park in a makeshift coffin. What an appalling flip-flop by Ford indeed. After all, in 2018, the year Ford was first elected with a majority mandate, the city of Victoria, BC emerged as an early adopter of Sir John A. Macdonald eradication. That city decided it was too insensitive in this day and age to display a statue of Sir John, so it was taken down and placed in storage somewhere else. At the time, Ford was outraged, I tell you, by this attack on our history. He tweeted, quote, Sir John A. Macdonald played a central role in our national story. As one of the fathers of Confederation, he founded our nation. That's why our government wrote to the mayor of Victoria to say we'd be happy to give Sir John A. new home here in Ontario, end quote. And yet, barely 2 years later, Ford went from being a defender of Sir John A. and gung-ho to even having 2 Sir John A. statues on the lawns of Queen's Park to a detractor of Sir John? Why? Well, apparently the very sight of the statue was triggering the thugs who comprise Antifa and Black Lives Matter. That's right, Ford bent the knee to woke hooligans, and even though Queen's Park has its own police force, and that the headquarters for the Toronto Police Service is a mere stone's throw away, well, better to appease the criminals than to, actually enforce the law. It's so bad that even Bonnie Crombie, the leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario, called Ford out on his cancel culture behavior just the other day. Here, check it out.
Outside Queen's Park, there's a statue of our very first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, the founder of our country. But you wouldn't know that because Doug Ford put a box around him 5 years ago. Now, that's crazy. We have to confront our history and not hide from it. We have to show them how strong we are, to show our pride in our past. Now, look, our past isn't perfect, but we have to confront it, not put a box around it. It looks weak, and we are not weak.
Yeah, that's right. A Liberal going to bat for our Dominion's first Conservative Prime Minister. Words fail me. Here's another example of wokeness. Do you know it is apparently against the law to ask transgenders impolite questions in Ontario? And if you are suspected that you might do so, the Ontario Provincial Police shall arrest you, kind of like the pre-crimes unit in Minority Report. That's what happened to me last May in Fergus. The OPP arrested me on the suspicion I might ask an insensitive question of a fake woman, Ash Davis, who was playing rugby with real women and injuring them in the process, contrary to World Rugby rules. So it was that I was falsely arrested in a public park for trespassing. Check it out.
You're under arrest for trespassing. Okay?
Why?
You're in the... Okay, hands behind your back, please.
Are you kidding me?
No, hands
Listen,
behind your back.
I'm not on the field.
Yes, you are. Hands
I'm
behind
not.
your back.
I'm not. How?
Hands behind your back, please.
Are you getting this, guys?
Can you please
Hands
stop resisting?
I'm not on the
Place
field.
your hands behind your back.
I'm not on the field.
David.
Do you have to
David,
handcuff me?
hands behind your back now.
Well, folks, this is my equipment. I'm going to give it to my cameraman. Okay.
Just let it go, and your cameraman can grab it for you. Okay.
This is Doug Ford's Praetorian Guard. They are arresting me on a trumped-up charge. I never trespassed on the field, and they are tolerating this man injuring female players. Can I go now?
No, you're going to get a ticket. Do you have anything in your pockets?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm just going to jump in so I can actually explain stuff.
By the way, did you know that the current Minister of Sport in Ontario is none other than Neil Lumsden? Mr. Lumsden has the credentials to be Ontario's best ever Minister of Sport. He's a man's man. He is an ex-professional football player who played for the Toronto Argonauts, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and the Edmonton Eskimos, winning 4 Grey Cups in the process. In other words, he walks the walk. And as a former pro football player, surely Neil Lumsden knows the inherent risks of men playing against women in a full contact sport like rugby, right? Nope. Lumsden has refused to rein in the trans madness being embraced by the woke morons at Rugby Ontario. In fact, Lumsden actually recently rewarded this sports organization with an additional $150,000 in taxpayer funding. Alas and alack, even this former champion football player is now a soy boy sellout too. Number 4, Ontario has a record deficit and debt. Okay, so we know that Doug Ford and his team are definitely not social conservatives, but get this, they're not fiscal conservatives either. As for the numbers, folks, well, you don't want to know the numbers, but I am duty-bound to report the economic carnage nevertheless. The deficit is forecast at $6.6 billion. As for the debt, $86 billion. And yet there's still billions of dollars for EV battery plants that might one day emerge as stillborn white elephants when they finally open. There's still billions of dollars for payola. I speak of those $200 checks for Ontarians that are just now being mailed out to voters on the eve of an election. Gee, what a coincidence, eh? As the Canadian Taxpayers Association recently noted, quote, Ontario's debt has erupted like a volcano under Premier Doug Ford's watch, and he has no one to blame but himself. Ford's fiscal record is worse than even his immediate predecessor, Kathleen Wynne, end quote. Number 5, Ford has done nothing to tackle anti-Semitism. You know, over the course of the past 15 months, I sometimes have difficulty recognizing the city of my birth and, for that matter, my own country. Every weekend, mobs of pro-Hamas thugs take to the streets to chant genocide against the Jewish people. They attack synagogues and Jewish schools. They set up illegal encampments at universities, etc. And nothing is done. Oh, correction, peaceful counter-demonstrators and members of the independent press are arrested because, their mere presence might further incite the Jew haters. And yes, I speak from bitter experience.
What's wrong with you guys? Who are you guys? What do you mean, you guys? See this? Yeah, my grandfather spent 5 years of his life fighting the Nazis. You think I'm going to bend the knee to the Islamo-Nazis? No. What crime am I committing? No, come on. Enforce the law. Obey your oath, officer. Obey your oath. Yeah, let's go. You're enforcing Sharia law? What am I doing here? Huh? Hey! Goodbye!
That was my third arrest for merely trying to cover an anti-Jew hate fest, this one at the intersection of Bathurst and Shepherd in Toronto, a heavily Jewish neighborhood. But did Doug Ford ever suggest to the police that they might want to, enforce Section 319 of the Criminal Code, that part about promoting genocide? No, and it gets worse, folks. This intersection is in the writing of Michael Kersner. He's Ontario's Solicitor General. Now, he shows up from time to time at this intersection. He'll say a prayer, he'll make a feel-good speech, but he does nothing tangible to put an end to this hate fest, even though as Solicitor General, he has the power to do so. And so it is that these savages continue to display swastikas and cosplay as Sinwar, the terrorist who masterminded the October 7th massacre in Israel. But God forbid you wear a ball cap bearing the logo of the Jewish Defense League. God forbid if you are an independent journalist directing insensitive questions toward this New Age Hitler Youth movement. That will get you arrested. And what makes it all the worse is that before Dougie became premier, he vowed that the insidious Al-Quds rally, another appalling Jew hate fest, would no longer have a home at Queen's Park. Does anyone remember that? But the reality is that under Ford, Queen's Park now welcomes anti-Semites. No, I do not exaggerate. Check out this footage from last October 7th, in which the pro-Hamas hooligans showed up at the Ontario legislature to yet again chant genocide on the one-year anniversary of the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. And as for law enforcement, nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
They're overtaking our city, our country, and Trudeau has ruined this country. Time for him to take a very long walk.
Oh, you're saying that because I'm Lebanese, motherfucker?
I don't know you're Lebanese.
Get away from me with that mic.
Why? You know what
Are we under Canadian law or Sharia law?
I'm not talking about ISIS.
Who are you talking about?
Yeah, I think you can figure it out yourself.
That's not very lady.
Yes, I can say that to you.
Someone decided they just don't want me to be on the grass. As simple as that.
If you're telling the truth, I mean, that seems like
the police grabbed me and physically, very roughly manhandled me.
Disgusting. So why did Ford flip-flop on this issue? Is he an anti-Semite himself? I don't know. Or maybe, like his buddy Blackface, he's done the electoral math and knows that thanks to really bad immigration policies and homegrown indoctrination, there are actually more anti-Semites in the province than defenders of Jews. So it's nothing personal, you see. It's just business, baby. Number 6, pandemic paralysis. Folks, only in our bizarro Superman world in which up is down and black is white could Doug Ford brag about his record as a leader during the COVID-19 pandemic. Check out this little soundbite.
We need a mandate from the people to fight against Donald Trump's tariffs, the attack he's coming against our families, our businesses, our communities. And with a strong mandate, we will be able to fight with Donald Trump to make sure we stop the tariffs and make sure that we give certainty to the people of Ontario. It may take investing tens of billions of dollars. We'll do tens of billions of dollars. It's no different than during the pandemic. We'll make sure we secure people's livelihoods, and I will do whatever it takes to protect the people of Ontario in turn, because we're the engine of Canada.
Did Ford really say that? That he preserved people's livelihoods during the pandemic? That was very selective preservation, wouldn't you say? Sure, it was business as usual for the multi-billion-dollar conglomerates like Walmart and Costco, thanks to their well-connected lobbyists. Naturally, the LCBO, the province's liquor monopoly, well, they weren't going to close their doors. Likewise, I understand business was never better at Ford's family firm, Deco Labels. Hey, there was such a demand by those anointed stores that got to stay open, you know, for those little directional arrows dictating which way one could walk in a shop, lest he or she get infected by the COVID-19 virus, as if a virus respects one-way streets. But if you operated a little mom and pop store, you were screwed, even though a small store could handle crowds and practice sanitation protocols far better than a superstore that dwarfs an aircraft hangar. Oh, and if you did not obey, if you did not comply, well, this is what happened.
Folks, it's coming up for 12:30, and just about 5 minutes ago, we had the door that was locked down by the city actually smashed open from the inside out, and then all hell broke loose. A lot of people here tried to cram themselves into the restaurant.
Stop it. Shame on these police. Shame on these police. Look at what they've started now. You're a hero, Adam. I love you guys. Move.
Yes, that's right. All the king's horses and all the king's men would come charging in to arrest a restaurateur who wanted to serve lunch to an appreciative clientele. Ford has the utter audacity to brag about preserving people's livelihoods during the pandemic when he was complicit in shutting down and jailing the little guys and gals who just wanted the same rights afforded to the corporate leviathans. And by the way, folks, the now defunct Adamson Barbecue, it was located just 400 meters away from a Costco superstore that ran a food service operation itself. Why the double standard? Follow the science? Number 7, Ford is threatening to ban bourbon. Incredibly, Ford seems to think he can win a trade war with Donald Trump by banning Kentucky-made bourbon. Check it out.
And I talked to the great governor of Kentucky, and I remember in the last tariffs we threw on the bourbon, first thing out of his mouth is, "Don't touch my bourbon." And I said, "Governor, that's a serious business down there when you touch with their bourbon. It's like messing with our LCBO." So I said, "You know, Governor, you got to talk to your president, Because the first thing we're doing, we're getting your bourbon.
Okay, now this time it's getting personal. I love a good Kentucky bourbon, and yet Dougie is going to deny me of this guilty pleasure. You know, I could say something witty here or give a raft of reasons why a bourbon ban is really a dumb idea. Number 8, Ford no longer loathes mainstream media reporters, rather he loves them. Once upon a time, Doug and his brother Rob said the mainstream media were comprised of, quote, a bunch of maggots, end quote. Yeah, that was when the mainstream media was viciously harassing Rob Ford when he was mayor of Toronto. Well, that was then and this is now because Doug Ford now kisses the asses of these maggots. Check it out.
Okay, here we go.
Hi, Premier Jack Howard from the Trillium.
Hey, Jack, how are you?
Good, thanks. On bike lanes, just kidding.
Oh, what a knee slapper. Looks like the media isn't so maggoty these days, eh, Doug? Here's another lovin'.
Hey, good morning, Premier Colin DeMello from Global News.
Colin, I like that blue. You wore that blue for me, didn't you? A TO blue jacket. I'm waiting. I'm a double X. Sometimes if I eat a lot of triple X.
I'm wearing a jacket that says Toronto on it in Milton. I apologize, Mayor.
Do you know a couple of years ago that midget Colin DeMello ratted me out to Queen's Park Security when I was in the Ontario legislature to conduct a consensual interview with an MPP? And because we live in a police state, I was indeed frog marched outside by the provincial Gestapo, even though I had an invite to be there. But I digress. And on the flip side, independent media is now persona non grata. Do you know that Ford used to be a guest at Rebel News Live events? Do you know that Ford pitched a Rebel News weekly show that I was going to co-host? When he bailed on that show, I asked Doug why. Doug said he would love to do the show, but as he said, it's the team, Dave. The team doesn't want me to do it. Remember what I said about puppet masters, folks? And today, if I show up at a Ford event, I'm actually threatened with arrest. You know, I might ask a prickly question, I guess. Unbelievable.
Okay, then. So why does the Premier invite me? And then you guys say, not only am I not invited, you won't even give me a reason why I'm not invited.
I just told you why you're not invited.
No, you didn't. What is the reason?
You're not invited because you've tried this before and we didn't allow you in. So
for 15 years, I've been coming to Ford family events. 15 years more. Sure. And I've been welcomed with open arms. Is it too much to ask to get it?
You're trespassing now, so you can make your way to the sidewalk.
Number 9, Doug has earned his nickname of Flip Flop Ford. You know, a real leader makes firm decisions and sticks to his guns. Ford folds like a cheap lawn chair whenever he gets blowback. In fact, it's hard to believe anything coming out of his mouth. For example, here's what he had to say about Olivia Chow the day before Toronto's 2023 mayoral election.
If Olivia Chow gets in, it'll be an unmitigated disaster. Taxes are going to go up 25 to 30% when people can't afford the rent, can't afford mortgages now. Businesses are going to be fleeing Toronto as far as I'm concerned. I'll tell you, I've talked to business communities, both myself and the previous mayor, John Tory. People are terrified. Businesses are terrified. Therefore, the workers should be terrified. Because we've seen what happens when a mayor, she makes David Miller look like a fiscal conservative.
An unmitigated disaster, right? And 24 hours after Chow was elected, here's what Ford had to say.
During the election, you throw some mud back and forth, but I'll tell you one thing, people expect us to work together, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll work together, and we're going to find common ground when we sit down, because she's actually quite a nice person.
So the unmitigated disaster morphed into quite a nice person overnight? Golly, I'm having deja vu. Oh, I know. I'm thinking of a TV show I used to watch as a kid.
They call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning. No one you see.
Sure, the polls look good for Ford and the Liberals and the NDP. They're cash-strapped. They don't want an election right now. But in the department of careful what you wish for, I have vivid memories of the 1990 Ontario provincial election. The David Peterson Liberals held a comfortable majority government, but Premier Peterson decided to go to the polls early. Consider this TVO article entitled Orange Shockwave, How Ontario Got Its First Ever NDP Government. It notes, quote, over the course of the 37-day campaign, Peterson failed to convince voters that he had been right to call an election only 3 years after winning an overwhelming majority. That, combined with an existing scandal, targeted protests by groups angry with the government, and the suggestion of political entitlement, resulted in Ontario's first NDP government, end quote. That's uncanny, isn't it? That descriptor of the political environment in Ontario in 1990, well, it could be used word for word today. Also, please believe me when I tell you that when Ontarians woke up the next morning after Election Day and discovered the NDP was indeed in charge, there was collective shock. Nobody saw this coming, and I mean nobody, including the top-tier polling firms and even the NDP itself. Here's my hunch. I don't think the NDP won the election as much as the Liberals lost it, which is to say, I think hundreds of thousands of Ontarians were resentful of the early election and simply voted NDP by way of protest or simply stayed home, never dreaming that Bob Rae would actually emerge as premier. It was a shockwave indeed. Could this happen on February 27th as well? Do you know of a single friend, family member, or colleague who is right now saying, I just can't wait for an early provincial election in wintertime? In that regard, I think Doug Ford, or more accurately, Ford's puppet masters, are playing with fire here, that perhaps we are headed for another 1990 surprise. Now, I wouldn't bet on that, but by the same token, I wouldn't bet against it happening either. So am I endorsing the NDP or the Liberals? Well, of course not. All three mainstream parties are bad. But as conservatives, is this what it really boils down to? That we shall cast a vote for the PCs not based on merit, but because this party is the least worst of the three? Is that really how low the benchmark is for conservatives right now? And that brings me to my number 10 reason why I will not be voting for the Doug Ford PCs, and it boils down to 3 words: Tanya Granick Allen. You see, folks, I'm not hopping off the Doug Ford bandwagon in 2025. That's because I never hopped aboard the bandwagon in 2022 or even back in 2018, even though, like so many others, I longed for change in Ontario that year after the misery inflicted on this province by Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. But I smelled a rat prior to Election Day 2018. You see, after Sneaky Patrick Brown was ousted as PC leader, a leadership campaign took place. Tanya Granick Allen vied to be party leader, but when it was clear that she did not have the necessary support, she told her supporters to back Ford instead. The final vote was a photo finish, and without Tanya's support, Christine Elliott would have won and gone on to become the premier. But Ford carried the day. Meanwhile, Tanya was slated to run as an MPP in Mississauga. And then some allegedly controversial social media posts from several years ago emerged, and suddenly the woman who was Ford's kingmaker was now toxic baggage. Ford didn't hesitate to throw Tanya under the bus. Yeah, thanks for your support, baby, but really, what have you done for me lately? It rattled me. Tanya would have made a superb MPP, but the callous way in which she was discarded reminded me that in politics, the so-called little people, well, we're all equivalent to Kleenex. A facial tissue is quite useful when one needs to blow their nose, but once the tissue has served its purpose, well, that spent Kleenex is now rendered useless and promptly discarded. You know, the late, great Rob Ford, who I miss dearly, would never treat people like that. Poor Rob. He must be turning in his grave like a 7-Eleven hot dog on a rotisserie right now, given the odious behavior of his brother. And by the way, for those cult-like members of Ford Nation who would vote for a chimpanzee as long as it had the surname Ford, please don't accuse me of being a turncoat. Please don't accuse me of being anti-conservative, because in the final analysis, the harsh reality is this. Under Doug Ford's so-called leadership, I did not abandon the PC party. Rather, the PC party abandoned me.